This story begins with a gangster smoking and quite annoyed because someone is taking forever to arrive. He looks at his cell phone and complains that it makes no sense for a simple Chinese food delivery to take more than an hour. While observing his henchman, the man complains that nowadays nobody does their job properly anymore, from politicians to large corporations. Holding a baseball bat, he continues his sermon, saying that everyone should be professional so that the world works better. At this point, he reveals that he is talking to a man tied upside down and asks if he agrees to it. The gangster claims he is simply doing his job professionally. He explains to the prisoner that his lack of professionalism has made people hate him, and that's why he's going to end up dying there. The man prepares to strike with a stick and warns the prisoner not to move, as a blow in the wrong place could be fatal. He complains that the prisoner continues to struggle, even after receiving clear orders to beat him severely before finishing him off. Suddenly, a voice announces the arrival of a delivery right at the entrance of the dark warehouse. The gangster turns around angrily, grumbling that the delivery guy finally arrived, but at the worst possible time. However, upon closer inspection, the mobster realizes something is very strange and asks who that fellow is. He finds it even stranger that a simple motorcycle delivery man managed to easily get past all of his henchmen outside. Without saying a word, the mysterious motorcyclist simply places his metal delivery box on the ground. He crouches down calmly and opens the little door of the box. Instead of taking the food from there, the delivery man starts pointing and counting how many thugs are in the area. He types into a small machine, calculating an extra fee for each armed opponent, in addition to the night shift bonus. The gang leader loses patience with the bizarre accounting and shouts, demanding to know the intruder's identity. With all the calm in the world, the delivery man replies that the service ordered is just a fight. He explains that he will only receive payment if he eliminates them all, so it's nothing personal. The gangster doesn't believe a word, and his armed men advance immediately. The boss orders his henchmen to quickly finish off the lazy delivery man. The motorcyclist kicks the lid of the delivery box to initiate the fight. He delivers a violent headbutt to the first henchman who approaches. Another henchman tries to attack him from behind, wielding a knife. The delivery man blocks the attack by firmly gripping the opponent's wrist. Without wasting any time, he lands a precise punch right in the middle of the attacker's chest. The force of the blow is so great that it sends the henchman flying straight to the ground. The fight continues with the delivery man dodging and evading the blows of the other enemies with great agility. While struggling, he mentions that he's in a big hurry because he needs to attend to the next service call right after. The motorcyclist then signals for the rest of the group to attack him all at once. The gang leader can only hear the cries of pain from his men being defeated one by one. Breaking in a cold sweat, the leader begins to despair as he realizes that the delivery man is a monster in combat. The delivery man drags the last unconscious henchman and comes face to face with the boss, who can't understand how any of this happened. In a panic, the mobster shouts, asking who sent him and how much they're paying for the job. He desperately tries to bribe him, promising to pay double or triple any amount to be spared. But the delivery man ignores the pleas and lands a devastating punch right in his face. With the gangster knocked out on the ground, the delivery driver warns that accepting a bribe would be a serious violation of the company's terms and conditions. The motorcyclist crouches beside the unconscious body of the mafia leader. At that point, he takes out his cell phone to take a picture of the completed job. He gives a thumbs up and takes a picture right next to the defeated villain. The delivery person sends the verification photo and starts planning their next work destination. At that moment, the man who was tied upside down begins to grumble loudly to get her attention. The delivery man approaches and violently rips off the tape covering the prisoner's mouth. The man breathes a sigh of relief and begins to complain about the delay, demanding to be untied immediately because he is very dizzy. Realizing that the delivery man is still standing there just watching, he shouts again, demanding to be released immediately. To the man's surprise, the delivery driver looks at his cell phone and informs him that picking him up was not part of the contracted service. The prisoner becomes utterly desperate and begins to beg him not to leave him there alone upside down. Before leaving, the delivery man places a small piece of paper in the mouth of the tied-up man. This is the business card of Lee Sang, a delivery driver for the company Delivery Heaven, which states that he must place a formal order if he wishes to hire him in the future. Lee Sang lifts his helmet visor and reveals that he accepts any kind of work involving fighting, as long as the pay is fair. He shows his cell phone displaying a notification that a new service request has just arrived. The young man clenches his blood-covered fist, indicating that his true function is to fight when hired. After the fight is over, he finally receives his payment in cash, covered in combat marks. It turns out he's been doing this kind of side job for about 2 years. Walking through the school hallways in his uniform and with a neck pillow, he confesses that he's actually very good at what he does. At 18, Lee Sang takes a picture in the mirror and recognizes that he has already managed to save a good amount of money for someone his age. He scrolls through his phone, thinking about everything he needs to accomplish before his adolescence ends. The screen displays advertisements for extremely expensive luxury apartments costing billions of won. Lee Sang is outraged to find that property prices have risen even further, finding the real estate market values absolutely insane. Then, a new notification informs you that a deposit of over 1 million won has been credited to your Delivery Heaven account. His current bank balance already exceeds 52 million won, although he still has to deduct fuel expenses. He sighs wearily, knowing that at the current pace it would be nearly impossible to buy his dream house even if he worked his entire life. To make matters worse, the frequency of fight requests has decreased significantly lately, leaving him far from reaching his financial goal. Given this, he begins to wonder if he should look for another way to make money more quickly. The young man grumbles to himself in the hallway, wishing a mountain of money would simply fall into his hands. While he wishes fortune would fall from the sky, a female student is forcefully pushed and falls to the ground right behind him. Lee Sang glances sideways with a bored expression as he listens to someone apologize sarcastically. The person responsible for the shove is a bully who mocks the fallen girl, telling her to eat more so she won't be so light and won't worry him. One of the bully's accomplices starts laughing loudly, finding great amusement in the cynical way his friend treats the victim. On the ground, the dark-haired, red-eyed student stares at her attacker with a deeply furious look. Annoyed by the girl's audacity, the bully demands that she stop staring at him immediately. He raises his foot to threaten her and says she needs to learn her place instead of acting so proud. The aggressor continues to humiliate the girl, mentioning that he heard rumors that her father died heavily in debt and left her completely bankrupt. He moves even closer and states that he is not making a difficult offer to accept. With an arrogant smile, the boy says he's simply demanding that she become his girlfriend. Even under the young woman's deadly gaze, he insists, saying he would even give her money to help her. Suddenly, a voice interrupts the conversation, causing the bully's accomplices to turn around in fright. Lee Sang appears right behind them and directly demands that the aggressor apologize to the girl. The bully reacts with mockery to the intrusion, but one of his accomplices begins to tremble with fear upon recognizing the newcomer. The desperate henchman tries to restrain his friend and shouts that the person there is none other than the dreaded Lee Sang. He quickly explains that, being a transfer student, the bully doesn't know that even the older students don't dare mess with Lee Sang. Even with his friend's tense warning, the bully makes a mocking face and says he has no intention of apologizing. He breaks away from his friends and moves toward Lee Sang, asking if he happens to be the boyfriend of that broke girl. Lee Sang maintains a completely cold and expressionless gaze in the face of the delinquent's provocations. The bully pulls a pocket knife from his pocket and menacingly orders the young man to lower his head. Blind with rage, the attacker shouts that he will gouge Lee Sang's eyes out with the blade. Before anything worse happens, the terrified accomplice grabs his own friend from behind to stop him, calling him a psychopath. The two thugs drag the struggling bully down the hallway while desperately apologizing on his behalf. Lee Sang simply watches them leave and laments that those disrespectful idiots left without a real apology. Enguida, he throws a small piece of paper that lands precisely on the girl's head. The young man starts to walk away down the hallway and tells her to call if she needs any help. He adds that he could beat up anyone for her, even promising a special 2% discount if things got tough. The student remains seated silently in the empty hallway, processing everything that has just happened. She picks the paper up from the floor and realizes it's Lee Sang's business card as a fight delivery man. The girl stares at the card in her hands, thoughtful about her schoolmate's unusual proposal. Later, the bell rings and the students begin to leave the school premises in the late afternoon. The cell phone clock shows a little after 6 o'clock in the afternoon, indicating the end of the school day. Lee Sang is seen sitting by the river eating a snack, deeply lamenting the fact that he hadn't received any work calls up to that point. Watching the sunset beside his delivery motorcycle, the young man concludes that the life of a self-employed worker is truly very difficult. Observing the beautiful cityscape across the river, Lee Sang reflects on the sheer number of buildings in the city. He bitterly laments the fact that, despite the existence of so many buildings, none of them belong to him. Suddenly, a loud sound from your cell phone announces that a new call from Delivery Heaven has just come in. Upon checking the screen, the young man realizes it's a valuable delivery with an advance payment of 10 million won in the luxurious Gangnam district. He gets up excitedly to check the exact address of the destination on the digital map. But upon reading the location details, his eyes widen as he realizes where he really needs to go. The service's destination is none other than the imposing Gangnam Tower Palace building, the very luxury condominium he had always dreamed of. Standing before the gigantic skyscraper, the delivery man is astonished that he can't even see the top of the structure. He opens his backpack thinking that this is an excellent opportunity to discover what life is like inside such a luxurious place. Determined, the boy begins to zip up his orange delivery overalls. He puts on his motorcycle helmet and adjusts his black gloves to get ready for work. Dressed in full fight delivery attire, the young man confesses that he finally feels motivated to work after a long time. He adjusts the display and mentally prepares himself for whatever comes his way. Upon entering, the motorcyclist walks with firm steps down the silent and sophisticated hallway of the building in search of his payment. He finally arrives at the door of penthouse number 8001. Observing the entrance to the luxurious residence, he wonders what kind of grave mistake the resident must have made to attract so much resentment from someone. Without hesitation, the boy opens the front door and announces his arrival loudly. He finds the absolute silence strange and wonders why all the lights in the house are completely off. To be able to see in the dark, the young man turns on the flashlight on his cell phone. The light reveals that the decorative plant pots are all marked with red pawn tags. As he moves forward, he realizes that virtually all the furniture and decorations from the luxurious room have also been confiscated by the court. The motorcyclist removes his helmet, sensing an unsettling atmosphere, complaining that the total darkness prevents him from seeing anything. He scratches his head in confusion as he tries to understand what is happening in that abandoned apartment. At that moment, two men in suits and black masks silently emerge from behind him, armed with batons. One of the invaders delivers a swift blow toward Lee Sang's head. The sound of the impact echoes through the dark room as the blow strikes the young man. With great agility, the delivery driver manages to dodge and throw the attacker to the ground with ease. Lee Sang observes the fallen man and tries to understand who those mysterious invaders might be. Several other armed men begin to emerge from the shadows, and the young man concludes that none of them look like the real residents of the area. He pulls out his phone, annoyed, grumbling that the client should have provided the correct number of opponents so he could recalculate the additional fee. The henchmen hesitate when they realize the intruder is just a boy, but the group's leader warns that he is no ordinary opponent. The gang leader orders his men to leave no opening and advance all at once. Before the leader can finish speaking, Lee Sang delivers a devastating kick that violently throws him against the wall. Without taking his eyes off his cell phone screen, the young man coldly comments that he has already eliminated two of them. Another henchman tries to attack him furiously from behind, brandishing a small axe. The delivery man blocks the blow, grabbing the attacker's fist with impressive force. In one swift movement, he throws his opponent away, causing several objects in the room to be destroyed by the impact. He grabs one of the heavy pieces of furniture that was thrown to use it as a barrier. With extreme violence, the boy smashes another henchman against a glass table, shattering it completely. The remaining criminals are paralyzed with terror as they witness how easily their companions are defeated. With a somber look, Lee Sang recounts that the number of defeated has now reached 5. He kicks another opponent away without showing the slightest effort or concern. Suddenly, a gigantic brute appears from behind and traps him in an extremely tight bear hug. The giant believes that despite the young man's agility, the enormous weight difference and brute strength will be enough to crush him. However, the brute's eyes widen in surprise when he senses that the boy is not at all shaken by his physical pressure. The delivery man grabs the giant's fingers and begins to bend them backward with unbelievable force, breaking his opponent's bones. Lee Sang complains disgustedly, saying that receiving a tight hug from behind from another man is utterly repugnant. He further strains the big guy's joints, causing the giant to scream in agony from the unbearable pain. The young man then directs his intimidating gaze at the last criminal armed with a knife and asks why he is hesitating to attack. Still holding the defeated brute, Lee Sang asks, ironically, if the last henchman would prefer that he himself go over there and finish the fight. The last remaining henchman charges forward, cursing, consumed by hatred and the desperation of being the only one left standing. In an instant, Lee Sang defeats him and celebrates having finished off the 7 invaders who were there. But suddenly, the creaking of a door opening echoes through the dark apartment. The young man sighs, realizing that the count of opponents may not be finished yet. He prepares a quick punch to neutralize whoever is coming out of there unexpectedly. However, the boy stops the attack at the last second and is completely shocked by what he sees. Right in front of his clenched fist is the dark-haired, red-eyed girl from his school. Completely confused, Lee Sang lowers his guard and asks what she's doing in that luxury apartment. The young woman simply stares at him seriously and asks why he thinks she would be there. She holds out her own cell phone, displaying the Delivery Heaven app, and reveals that she was the one who requested the 10 million won service. The girl explains that those men were hitmen sent to get her, acknowledging that the task must not have been easy at all. She walks calmly among the defeated bodies and praises his skill in knocking them all out without suffering a single scratch and without needing to kill them. Still trying to process all that madness, Lee Sang murmurs, not understanding anything she's saying. The student observes him silently with her penetrating and enigmatic gaze. She confronts the delivery driver and directly proposes that he start working with her. Depicting the chaotic situation around her, she explains that her personal safety is in grave danger and that she wishes to officially hire his force. The girl assures him that the service isn't much different from what he usually does, but the motorcyclist reacts with irritation, asking what kind of conversation that is. Lee Sang approaches angrily and makes it very clear that he does not accept exclusivity contracts with clients, as this would violate the operating rules of his delivery company. He adds that he heard rumors at school that she was completely bankrupt due to debts left by her father. Disdainfully, the delivery man suggests that she should first worry about how she's going to pay the delivery fee before making expensive offers. The student simply gives a wry smile and enigmatically accepts the challenge. Lee Sang continues grumbling about people paying with cash these days, but urges her to hurry up and make the payment soon. He points out that the total amount is much higher due to extra fees and makes it clear that she doesn't even need to think about asking for a discount after all the trouble she caused. To his surprise, the girl simply throws a huge wad of tied-up money right in front of his feet. Then she turns her backpack around and starts dumping an absurd amount of 50,000 won bills onto the ground. The motorcyclist is completely paralyzed as she offers the unbelievable sum of 100 million won for each job performed. The young woman picks up her empty backpack and states that she doesn't care about his politics, as she needs protection and he needs money. Pointing to the enormous fortune scattered on the floor, she asks if their alignment of interests isn't already enough to close the deal. Holding some of those wads of real money, Lee Sang feels his heart race at the sight of so much wealth. He begins to sweat profusely, unable to believe that he is actually holding 100 million won in cash. Pleased with the delivery man's reaction, the girl comments ironically that his gaze finally seems much friendlier. The young man remains in a trance, absorbing the absurd amount of money he holds in his hands. The girl then asks one last time if he will accept the proposal or not. Later, the scene shifts to a quiet residential city street at night. Lee Sang appears inside an ATM booth that is open 24 hours a day. He holds a single, rather crumpled and worn 50,000 won note in his left hand. With a frustrated expression, the boy stares at the money before depositing it into the machine. He inserts the crumpled bill into the deposit compartment of the ATM. The machine starts making noise while processing the young man's banking transaction. Lee Sang waits patiently with a weary and disheartened look in front of the illuminated screen. The machine confirms that only 50,000 won have been added to your savings account. The screen displays a closing message, thanking the customer for their patronage and requesting that they remove their card. At that moment, the delivery man gritted his teeth in anger upon realizing that the tempting offer from minutes earlier was, in fact, real. Going back to what happened 2 hours earlier on the rooftop, the girl repeats her crucial question about forming a partnership. She insists on knowing if he is willing to close the deal with her once and for all. Seduced by the amount of money, the young man hurriedly begins to gather the bundles of cash scattered on the floor. He lowers his head with a tense expression, pretending to be completely surrendered to her bribe. The young man looks directly at the young woman and says that they have a deal. But then Lee Sang violently kicks the mountain of money, scattering the bills into the air while asking if she really thought he would accept that nonsense. The student calmly watches the shower of money falling around her, admitting that the delivery man's performance was good and that she almost fell for his act for a second. Lee Sang holds one of the 50,000 won notes and examines it very carefully. He looks at the girl and states with complete conviction that all that money is counterfeit. The young man explains that the smell, texture, and even the color of the bills give away the fake, asking if she really thought he wouldn't be able to tell counterfeit money from real money. He points to the pawn tags scattered across the furniture and reminds her that she's bankrupt, questioning who she thinks she's trying to fool with that scam. The girl remains silent for a moment and asks if he's really going to refuse the offer and if he won't end up regretting it later. As a definitive response, the delivery man simply raises his hand and shows her the middle finger. Lee Sang starts to leave, saying he'll waive the visitation fee because she looks sick, but warns her to pretend she doesn't know him if they bump into each other at school. Back at the ATM, the young man is utterly desperate when he realizes that all those bundles of money he kicked were, in fact, completely real. He begins banging his head against the glass of the cabin, torn between regret at having lost his fortune and his pride, which prevents him from going back there to beg. He leans against the ATM, feeling like he's going crazy, wondering if he'll ever have another opportunity to earn this much money. However, the boy remembers that there is still one last hope when he looks at his cell phone screen. The device displays a chart of a cryptocurrency in which he had invested a few days ago and which is rising absurdly. Lee Sang's eyes widened in disbelief that the value of his investment was skyrocketing and multiplying by digits every second. He starts laughing hysterically and celebrates that investing is the real trend of the moment, shouting that he's going to invest everything to finally buy his luxury penthouse. But his joy is short-lived, as the graph suffers a drastic drop of almost 100%, causing his cell phone screen to crack with rage. Meanwhile, some people are calmly walking along the sidewalk outside the bank booth. Suddenly, a violent crash echoes through the street as Lee Sang shatters the ATM glass with a punch of pure fury. The cabin is completely destroyed, with smoke and debris flying everywhere after the young man's fit of rage. Seeing the pedestrians running away in fright, the delivery man finally comes to his senses and realizes the enormous trouble he's gotten himself into. A short time later, he appears handcuffed and surrounded by police officers who comment to the police chief about the fact that he is a minor. At the police station, the officer types up the report and questions what was going through the young man's mind to destroy the property and whether he was trying to rob the bank. The officer warns that he will only be released on the condition that he pays the full amount of the damages caused within 1 week. Lee Sang is completely speechless, his gaze blank as he faces the financial disaster he has just created for himself. He holds up the police receipt detailing that the cost of the broken equipment and the restoration of the site totals almost 10 million won. The young man walks back home under the dawn sky, feeling completely crushed by the weight of that enormous debt. He continues on his way with his head down, bitterly regretting having refused the girl's $1 million offer the day before. The following day, the scene shifts to the schoolyard under a clear sky. Exhausted and with deep dark circles under his eyes, Lee Sang meets up with the dark-haired girl again and mentions the conversation they had the previous day. Without beating around the bush, he asks her to forget her refusal and give him another chance to accept the job. The young woman simply stares at him in silence with a cold and indifferent expression. At that moment, the bully Min Seop and his group of students appear downstairs, puzzled by what that strange boy is saying. Min Seop approaches with an arrogant smile, saying that the reunion was at the perfect time, as he had already planned to give Lee Sang a beating that very day. The bully taunts, saying that last time he only backed down because of exaggerated rumors, but today he has brought elite allies who really know how to fight. The brute prepares to start the fight, but is interrupted the instant Lee Sang grabs his face forcefully. While brutally throwing the bully to the ground, Lee Sang yells at the girl, begging her not to be cold and not to refuse his help now. The other students watch the scene in shock as they see Min Seop defeated so easily with a single move. One of the henchmen runs angrily towards the boy, cursing him and asking if he's gone completely mad. While dodging and landing a punch on the attacker, the delivery man continues explaining to the girl that it's natural to be cautious and suspicious when dealing with so much money. He dodges a baseball bat and knocks down another opponent, justifying that he couldn't make such an important decision impulsively right away. In the midst of the fight, he shouts, offering to accept only half the original amount and suggesting making the payment securely through the company's app. The young man continues throwing the henchman into the air and begs for at least 10 million won up front, inventing the excuse that he needs the money quickly because of an unforeseen event. The young woman watches the entire display of force without showing the slightest reaction, while the young man extends his hand towards her. With all the bullies knocked out around her, the delivery man asks her again to hand over the contract once and for all. The girl looks at his outstretched hand and calmly states that she agrees to sign the document. However, immediately afterwards, she simply turns around and starts to walk away. Completely desperate, Lee Sang runs after her, shouting and asking why she's leaving when he just accepted the job she wanted so badly. The young woman stops walking and comments that he spent the entire conversation acting inappropriately. She turns to the side and complains that he has been speaking to her informally and without the slightest sign of respect. The girl asks if that's really the posture of someone begging for a favor, demanding that he repeat the request politely. While some female students gossip in the background about the situation, Lee Sang mentally grumbles at the demand, muttering that she should respect him as a contractor instead of demanding silly formalities. The girl coldly warns him that if he's unable to do what she asked, it's best to forget about it, leaving Lee Sang struggling with his pride to comply with her demands. She simply walks over the defeated Min Seop lying on the ground, while the delivery man follows her with a sour face. While rummaging through her bag, the young woman mentally reviews Min Seop's information and decides that he needs severe punishment. She pulls a piece of paper from her backpack and looks back with determination. Lee Sang is quite surprised by the girl's firm and decisive attitude. The scene then shifts to a beautiful golf course under a sunny sky. A golf ball is hit hard and flies high into the blue sky. Several men in suits applaud, warmly, praising their boss's excellent shot and composure. The golfer, a man in a baseball cap and sunglasses, turns around with an extremely serious and intimidating expression. He angrily asks if those idiots really think he's in a good mood at that moment, causing them all to cower in fear. Smoking his cigarette, the man grumbles that he is surrounded by countless worthless people who don't deserve the salary they receive. The businessman in question is Heo Yonggang, the powerful chairman of Yonggang Steel and father of the bully Min Seop. At that moment, the cell phone in his pants pocket starts ringing non-stop. Upon picking up the phone and seeing that the call is from his beloved son, Heo Yonggang's expression instantly changes to a gentle smile. He answers the call, overflowing with affection, and asks if his beloved son needs more money to spend. However, the response from the other end of the line comes with clenched teeth and a tone of pure humiliation. Min Seop appears crying, sitting on the toilet, enraged at having his hair shaved in the middle of his head and demanding the death of the girl who did it. Heo Yonggang's smile fades instantly when he realizes that the person responsible for his son's humiliation is the daughter of his old rival. In tears, the bully shouts that the girl sent thugs to beat him up and even shaved a strip of hair out of his head with clippers. Min Seop continues to shout that photos of him passed out and with his head shaved have already been spread across all social media. He cries desperately with tissues over his nose, wondering how he will be able to face his classmates and go back to school after going through such shame. On the other end, Heo Yonggang listens to his son's account in absolute silence while puffing on his cigarette. He calms the boy protectively, assuring him that he will personally take care of resolving the whole situation and that his son doesn't need to worry about anything. The businessman clicks the phone shut. Heo Yonggang reflects furiously on the audacity of his rival's daughter in humiliating his own son in that way. The image opens up to reveal that golf balls were being hit directly over the heads of several of his henchmen, who were buried alive in the lawn. He kicks one of the buried men and complains that they received a fortune in advance, but were unable to capture a mere schoolgirl. The president raises his golf club menacingly over the head of another henchman, stating that street gangsters can never be trusted. Without any mercy, Heo Yonggang makes a powerful shot, using the buried man's head as a foothold for the golf ball. He wipes the sweat from his face with a mocking tone after the violent blow. Suddenly, a new delivery man wearing light blue overalls and a helmet appears on the scene, casually commenting that golf seems much more difficult than it looks. He introduces himself as Bae Min-jun and says with a wry smile that he prefers to continue doing his usual job of beating people up for money. Heo Yonggang agrees and signals for his secretary to approach with the boy's payment. The secretary opens a black briefcase full of money in front of Bae Min-jun and asks him to successfully complete the job. The briefcase displays neatly organized stacks of 50,000 won notes as an initial reward for the work. Bae Min-jun observes all that cash with a serene expression. Suddenly, he starts laughing loudly and boisterously in the faces of the mobsters. The delivery man pats the secretary on the shoulder in a friendly manner and mocks Heo Yonggang for using such outdated methods to hire a service nowadays. He shows his cell phone screen displaying the Delivery Heaven app and explains that all professional delivery drivers now receive their orders through it in a much more modern way. Bae Min-jun scoffs, saying it's no wonder they're having so much trouble capturing a mere 18-year-old girl. Annoyed by the boy's audacity, the secretary grabs him by the shoulder and demands that he watch his words before speaking to the boss. In a fraction of a second, Bae Min-jun lands a swift and precise blow that sends the secretary's head spinning violently. With a menacing look behind his protective glasses, the delivery man coldly warns that no one should dare touch him again. The other secretary runs away desperately shouting for the injured manager, while the motorcyclist grumbles that the work is poorly done because the managers are incompetent. Heo Yonggang swallows his pride and acknowledges that they did indeed fail in the previous mission, agreeing to leave the case entirely in Bae Min-jun's hands. The president is simply asking that the delivery person complete the service as quickly as possible. He shows Seong Seon-ha's profile on his cell phone and warns that there is information indicating she has just hired an exclusive driver to protect her. The new delivery man fixes his psychopathic gaze on the photo of the young woman with black hair. Bae Min-jun gives a sadistic smile and warns that he will resolve the situation his way, asking if there is any problem with that. Heo Yonggang lights another cigarette and replies that he can do whatever he wants, as long as he cleans up the mess afterwards so as not to leave any witnesses. Bae Min-jun stretches out his finger and firmly presses the button to accept the mission call from his app. The new delivery driver flashes a menacing grin beneath his helmet, enthusiastically confirming his acceptance of the lucrative deal. Meanwhile, Lee Sang's cell phone screen displays a notification confirming that the enormous sum of 50 million won has been deposited into his account. The young man checks the details of the app, which states that all future transactions will be settled by the platform during the protection contract period. Seong Seon-ha places her finger under Lee Sang's chin and imposes a strict rule. He is strictly forbidden from accepting any other work while under contract with her. She looks at him seriously and demands that no matter what happens or what the situation is, he must always remain by her side to protect her. The girl points her finger at him and asks if he is willing to swear that he will keep this promise of professional loyalty. The delivery man remained silent for a few moments, processing the seriousness of the demand. He steps back a little and scratches his head awkwardly, commenting that her statement about always wanting him by her side sounded quite strange, and asking if she isn't ashamed of saying such embarrassing things. Without showing much emotion, the young man raises his left hand and agrees to take the professional oath. The young woman watches him intently with her red eyes as he confirms his oath. Suddenly, his cell phone starts ringing, alerting him that a new urgent combat call has just been requested. Seon-ha stares at him and announces that, from that exact moment on, he is officially his exclusive driver and protector under a combat contract. Lee Sang stares at the device, sweating with worry, relieved to have paid off the bank debt, but desperate not knowing how he will pay the rent and food for the month with what's left. He asks if she wouldn't prefer a simpler, cheaper order, suggesting he'd gladly accept even a simple delivery to pick up her lunch. The girl simply starts walking in the opposite direction, causing the delivery man to point in confusion and warn that the way to school is the other way. She looks back indifferently and says she needs to go to work right now. The boy completely panics and shouts angrily, asking if she's suggesting he skip class, since he insists on maintaining perfect attendance. Completely ignoring the dramatic protests about the school attendance award, the young woman asks where he parked his motorcycle. A short time later, the two appear cutting through the city aboard Lee Sang's yellow delivery motorcycle. They arrive in front of the facade of Tanjeo High School. Inside a dark classroom, a group of frightened female students are held captive under the watchful eye of a masked brute. The leader of the local bullies, Song Jong-soo, appears relaxed in a chair, watching everything with utter boredom. He commands the attention of his accomplices with an authoritative tone of voice. The leader asks what they did to terrify the girls so much, and his chubby henchman, who's eating a kebab, swears he spoke to them very politely. Song Jong-soo mocks the students' fear, saying he doesn't understand why they all look like frightened pigs about to enter a slaughterhouse, since they went there of their own accord. He leans back in his chair and orders them to relax in a threatening tone, warning that he will repeat his order only one more time. In front of cameras positioned by his henchmen, the bully cruelly orders the girls to take off their uniforms. The aggressor points his finger and warns that if they continue to refuse, he will be forced to use physical force, suggesting that they obey while he is asking politely. Suddenly, Lee Sang's voice echoes from the back of the makeshift studio, announcing the arrival of a new installment. The young delivery man checks his cell phone and asks directly if that person is the third-year student named Song Jong-soo. The delinquents are confused by the interruption, and the bully asks if anyone there ordered food while telling his friend to stop eating at 9 in the morning. Song Jong-soo tries to understand how the intruder knows his name, but is surprised by an extremely fast movement that appears in his direction. With a devastating spinning kick, Lee Sang strikes the bully in the face and violently throws him against the room's filming equipment. The delivery man points to the knocked-out leader and informs the other henchmen that the job is done. Upon seeing their leader lying unconscious on the ground, the surviving accomplices raise their hands in a sign of immediate surrender. Seon-ha calmly enters the room and asks if he performed the service exactly as she instructed. Giving a thumbs up, Lee Sang proudly confirms that the beating was delivered quickly and with great precision. The girl crouches beside the bully's unconscious body and picks up his cell phone to try and unlock it. She holds the device up to Song Jong-soo's bloodied face to try and perform facial recognition unlocking. However, the screen displays an error message, warning that facial recognition failed and could not be used due to injuries. The young woman lets out a deep sigh of pure frustration at the failed attempt to access the property. She angrily complains to Lee Sang, saying that's exactly why she ordered him to avoid hitting the targets in the face, calling him an amateur for not following instructions. The girl orders him to work more professionally and demands that he fetch tissues from her bag to clean up the blood, while the frightened henchmen whisper about whether they should try to flee or attack the delivery man from behind. But before they can plan anything, the two henchmen freeze in fear when they are caught in the act. Seon-ha stares at them with a chilling look and demands to know which schools they kidnapped each of those students from. She points her finger at them in an authoritative manner. The girl orders the two henchmen to immediately kneel in that corner of the room with their hands up. She warns that they will die if they lower their arms without permission, making Lee Sang think to himself about his new boss's frightening temper. At that moment, she suddenly turns to the boy and asks what he's doing standing there, startling him quite a bit. The girl turns around and tells the boy to hurry up, warning him that they still have many other places to visit. The next destination for the beating service is Guzheng High School. When they enter the room, the leader of the local delinquents, Jong Song-won, mockingly asks if anyone ordered delivery before lunchtime and demands to know who the intruder is. In response, Lee Sang delivers a violent punch to the face of the leader of Guzheng High School. The young man then lifts the defeated delinquent's head and snaps a quick photo to confirm the completion of yet another delivery. Next, another delinquent is chased down the hallway and screams in pain as he desperately tries to escape. The boy's desperate moans echoed near the door to the teacher's lounge. He bursts into the room yelling for the teachers and begging for help, saying that a complete psychopath is beating up all the students in the school. But before he can finish the sentence, Lee Sang grabs him forcefully by the mouth, interrupting his plea for help. The delivery man drags the boy back into the hallway and gives a sheepish smile to the startled teachers, lying that they were just playing cops and robbers. At Somyong High School, the young man takes a verification photo of another local gang leader after easily defeating him. He continues his streak of deliveries, recording the defeat of another bully known as Mad Dog. 2 more leaders of school gangs from different colleges have been added to Lee Sang's list of completed deliveries. The last target of the schools in the region is also defeated with extreme ease by the elite delivery man. With the photo taken, the young man officially confirms the completion of yet another successful mission for his boss. The delivery bag on the back of the motorcycle opens, revealing a huge stack of cell phones confiscated from all the defeated bullies. Seong Seon-ha zips up the metal pouch to keep the devices safely stored. She climbs onto the back of the motorcycle and warns him that there's only one more destination left to finish the day, alerting him not to let his guard down under any circumstances because it's the most dangerous place of all. The driver glances sideways over his helmet, pondering the young woman's mysterious words. He crosses his arms and asks directly if the two of them can really be considered a true team. The student stares at him coldly and asks what he really means by that conversation. The young man scratches his helmet and explains that, since they are under a mutual partnership agreement, he feels there should be more dialogue and trust between them. He argues that they should at least share the same goals, while the young woman places her hand roughly on his yellow helmet. Handing over the helmet, she makes it perfectly clear that the two are not partners, much less teammates. With her red, cold eyes, she explains that their relationship is strictly commercial, based solely on money, where either party can break the contract at any time. She states that, for someone who represents only that in her life, it's perfectly natural that she wouldn't want to reveal any of her secrets. However, the girl decides to give in a little and explains that she is collecting the cell phones because one of them must contain the contact information of the mysterious person she is looking for. She reveals that her ultimate goal is to have the delivery person himself taken directly to the person she is looking for. The student puts the device away and asks if that explanation is enough to satisfy his curiosity. Suddenly, a deafening crash occurs as a truck hits their motorcycle head-on, throwing Lee Sang off and completely destroying the vehicle. Amidst the smoke and wreckage of the crash, the young man manages to hold the young woman firmly in his arms to protect her from the impact of the fall. He gently lays her down on the asphalt and asks protectively if she's okay. Seong Seon-ha reacts by pushing his hand away sharply. She jumps to her feet, her expression surprised at seeing the delivery man lying on the ground. The girl watches him with a rather worried and tense expression. However, Lee Sang deeply regrets what happened, saying that he is not doing well at all and feels terrible about it. The young man stares at the smoldering wreckage of his beloved yellow motorcycle and despairs as he remembers that he still has 28 months of payments left. At that moment, the bully Min Seop appears shouting from the truck window, celebrating having found those responsible for stealing his cell phone. The boy with the shaved head yells at the driver, complaining that he wasn't able to run them over properly and questioning whether he doesn't want to be paid for the service. The truck driver, an older man wearing a blue cap, awkwardly apologizes, explaining that he was out of practice because he hadn't made deliveries in that area for a long time. The driver gets out of the delivery truck and tells the young heir to wait a moment inside the vehicle. He walks to the back and begins to unlock the metal door of the cargo truck. With his arms outstretched in front of the delivery boxes, the man announces that he will make the delivery and finish everything quickly. The screen of one of the confiscated cell phones appears completely shattered and damaged after the strong impact of the collision. Seong Seon-ha picks up the devices from the floor and is deeply saddened to realize that all the cell phones were destroyed in the accident. With eyes red with anger, she analyzes the situation seriously. Upon reading the Godu Express logo emblazoned on the truck, she despairs, realizing they've ended up dealing with the worst possible delivery company. The young woman warns the boy to be extremely careful, explaining that this is not an ordinary delivery company and that he should approach cautiously. However, Lee Sang completely ignores his boss's warning and angrily charges towards the truck driver. With eyes bloodshot with pure rage behind his visor, the delivery man demands that the man pay for the damage to his motorcycle if he wants to stay alive. Inside the Godu Express delivery truck, the veteran driver begins rummaging through the cargo boxes in search of something specific. He grumbles to himself as he discards several packages, searching for the ideal tool for the situation. With a cynical smile on his face, the man finally finds what he so desperately wanted. He appears in the back of the truck wielding a long, wrapped wooden handle, excitedly commenting that it's been a while since he's used that special weapon for work. Oblivious to the danger, Lee Sang continues to lament the loss of his customized and unique motorcycle, whining that he bought it only 2 months ago. Consumed by hatred, the young man shouts that he will sue the driver, even for moral damages and emotional distress. Suddenly, the wooden packaging shatters, revealing a gigantic medieval chain weapon with a huge spiky sphere, which the driver spins with destructive force. He unleashes an attack with the heavy iron weapon, mockingly commenting that he's a bit out of practice and no longer has the precision to control the blow. The veteran smiles and tells the young man that he only survived that first impact by sheer luck, since the sphere grazed him. As the dust settles, the driver warns that the young man won't last long in this profession if he continues to act arrogantly. Lee Sang appears standing in the center of a destroyed concrete crater, while the man comments that he should have dodged instead of trying to block the blow. The delivery man remains silent as a bloody cut opens on his side from the impact. The experienced driver laughs and says he understands the young man's impulsiveness, stating that it's normal for young people his age to want to show off when they have plenty of strength. He earnestly warns that he has seen countless hot-blooded young people end up dead because they didn't know how to control themselves, advising the boy to be careful. Without showing the slightest fear, Lee Sang clenches his fist and coldly orders the man to strike again. He explains that he was merely testing the weapon's range, having not fought armed opponents in a long time, assuring that this time he will repel the attack without problems. The veteran driver's expression instantly changes to one of pure coldness and hostility in the face of the challenge. He lunges forward, delivering a deadly blow, reaffirming that the boy will end up dead if he continues playing the tough guy. The gigantic sphere of iron spikes flies at high speed toward the young delivery man's head. With an incredibly powerful straight punch, Lee Sang strikes the iron sphere head-on, shattering it into several pieces. The driver's eyes widened, and he let out a sound of pure astonishment as he watched his heavy iron weapon be completely pulverized by the boy's fist. Maintaining his fighting stance, the young man calmly comments that he finally understands how the attack works. He clenches his smoking fist and announces that he's already got the hang of his opponent's fighting rhythm. The boy challenges his enemy to try any other technique, guaranteeing that he will crush each of their subsequent attacks. The veteran is paralyzed with shock as he stares at the broken end of the handle of his favorite weapon. He lets out a sound of amazement as he analyzes the absurd force of the punch that shattered the iron chain. With a nostalgic smile, the man comments that looking at the boy reminds him of his own reckless youth, when he risked his life attacking without thinking about the consequences. He disconnects another part of the wooden stick while admitting that today he doesn't understand how he could have lived in such a dangerous way. The remaining pieces of the heavy, spiky sphere fall unusable to the street floor. The driver turns around and calls to young Min Se-op, asking if he shouldn't get out of the truck to help him fight a little. Facing the frightened bully, the man taunts him, asking why a real man would be so afraid of a simple street fight. Min Se-op shouts angrily from inside the vehicle, yelling that he is the customer who paid for the service and demanding his money back, finding the situation absurd. Suddenly, a powerful kick hits the side of the truck right next to the window where the boy was yelling. The driver ignores the shouting and calmly asks if the spoiled heir has ever worked a part-time job in his life, receiving a negative response from the young protege. The man laments disdainfully, commenting that it's a shame a healthy young person has never worked, and blaming modern parents for being overprotective of their children. He asks if the boy at least knows how loading and unloading boxes of merchandise works, leaving the bully trembling with nervousness. Suddenly, Song Seon-ha desperately shouts Lee Sang's name to get his attention. The young man turns slightly to the side as he listens to his employer's tense warning. The girl yells, demanding that he remember he's on duty, and orders him to put his pride aside and act like a true security professional. She warns him that he won't be able to resolve the situation through violence alone, ordering him to retreat and find a safe escape route. However, Lee Sang adjusts his helmet and states with complete coldness that combat is his one and only true specialty. He shoots her a piercing look and warns her never again to tell him how he should fight. The veteran driver steps forward, delivering another blow with a heavier weapon, berating the young man for speaking so rudely to a woman. But Lee Sang strikes the new sphere of spikes head-on with another devastating punch, shattering the metal structure with a violent bang. The young man continues advancing and pulverizes a second heavy weapon with the incredible force of his clenched fists. The driver continues to attack fiercely with his chain blows, but all his attempts are systematically crushed by the boy. The man gasps in astonishment at how easily the boy disables his most powerful weapons. He looks at the damage and asks if the young man really intends to destroy everything in his path until he completes his protection mission. The veteran confesses with a smile that he greatly admires the young man's relentless determination to defend the girl at all costs. Seeing the pieces of the young man's helmet flying off in the wind, the driver wondered, perplexed, what on earth the boy's fists were made of to cause such destruction. Enraged, the driver yells at Min Se-op to speed up the work and keep throwing the cargo boxes without stopping. Min Se-op complains breathlessly about the driver's lack of skill, who tells him to shut up and continue unloading. The experienced driver casts a grim look and makes a direct threat to the young heir. He coldly warns that he will cut off Min Se-op's limbs if he stops throwing the boxes for even a second. Desperate, the bully starts yelling and throwing all the delivery boxes out of the truck as fast as he can, while the driver laments the lack of grit in today's youth. The man uses the sharp tip of his spear to pierce and secure one of the packages thrown into the air. Next, he hurls the heavy boxes of merchandise with full force toward Lee Sang. However, the young delivery man destroys each of the boxes that come his way with extremely precise and powerful punches. The driver's eyes widened in complete shock as he saw that all of his heavy projectiles had been easily pulverized. The tip of his metal weapon lies embedded and useless in the middle of one of the destroyed crates. Even so, the veteran attempts one last desperate attack, forcefully swinging his spear. Lee Sang intercepts the attack with a closed fist, splitting the steel blade in two with a metallic snap. The man is paralyzed with sweat and terror as he faces the boy's monstrous strength. The veteran is still trying to throw a few more packages and improvised weapons to keep the young man away. However, all the objects are summarily destroyed by the relentless punches of the boy who continues advancing. Lee Sang pierces one of the boxes with his iron fist and advances without any hesitation. The driver continues throwing everything in his path in a futile effort to stop the opponent's advance. With agile movements, the boy dodges some objects and destroys the rest in midair without suffering any damage. Another box is completely smashed to pieces by the young delivery man's powerful punch. The driver recoils in fright as he watches shards of his defenses fly through the air. Lee Sang slams his fist into the ground, the impact of the movement shattering the asphalt beneath his feet. The veteran gritted his teeth nervously as he realized he was completely cornered and defenseless. In a last-ditch effort, the man lifts a heavy concrete block marked with warning tape. He hurls the massive 500-kilogram pillar with all his remaining strength toward the boy. But Lee Sang strikes the concrete block directly with a devastating punch, shattering the heavy structure in half. Pieces of the broken pillar fly off as the young man continues running straight toward the truck. The Go-Do Express driver is completely paralyzed with terror, sweating profusely at the boy's unbelievable strength. On top of the truck, Minseop collapses back, exhausted, gasping that he finally managed to throw all the boxes down. The young delivery driver opens the safety clasp of his helmet with a sharp click. He removes his damaged helmet and, revealing his blonde hair, earnestly demands that the man pay for the damage to his yellow motorcycle. The driver stares at him in shock, remembering an old saying that, in the world of crime, the reckless always die first. The veteran's mind travels 30 years into the past, remembering when he himself was a reckless 22-year-old named Kim Taek-soo. At that time, a fellow gang member seriously warned him not to act impulsively, warning that he would end up dead if he continued to break the plans. The accomplices warned that the target in question was an extremely dangerous hitman hired by a large corporation. Young Kim Taek-soo reacted with disdain and curiosity upon hearing about the power of that large company. With utter arrogance, he asserted that the legendary executioner was nothing more than a lackey of rich old men and questioned whether the man truly knew the real taste of combat. The boy smiled smugly, arguing that recklessness is a weakness of the weak and that this did not apply to him because of his talent. However, the flashback cuts to a corridor completely covered in blood and defeated bodies, where the dreaded executioner stood holding a bloodied helmet. The corporate giant easily defeated young Kim Taek-soo and joked that he completely agreed with the idea that recklessness belongs to the weak. The legendary fighter commented that he also hated hearing older people warning him not to be reckless, questioning how people dared to say such harsh things. With a sadistic grin, the man revealed that all the veterans who had given him that advice were already dead and buried. The killer explained that he decided to spare the young Kim Taek-soo's life simply because he enjoyed finding someone he could talk to after a long time. He reached out his hand and suggested that the two of them continue living as recklessly as possible to prove everyone else wrong. Back in the present, the driver recalls that, after that terrible day, he completely changed his life and vowed never again to be the idiot who attacks empty-handed. Trembling with fear, he acknowledges that he abandoned fighting and went into hiding, cowering because of the trauma. The man confesses that he has spent the last few decades tormented by the constant fear of one day running into that monster again. He spent 30 years of his life trying to avoid any kind of confrontation, but the current situation ended up changing everything. The veteran begins to sweat profusely as he realizes that the young Lee Sang before him possesses the exact same gaze and brutal strength as that demon from the past. The man drops his cap on the ground, concluding that the only sensible option at that moment is to flee as quickly as possible. Turning his back on the fight, he decides he can no longer continue facing that monster. Kim Taek-soo realizes that facing a monster with such strength and determination is far beyond what he can truly endure. The veteran loses his cap and adopts a defensive posture, trembling with fear before the young delivery man. Lee Sang simply lets out a sound of surprise upon seeing his opponent's sudden change in attitude. Kim Taek-soo bitterly wonders if he should really continue living that cowardly life full of fear. He clenches his fist tightly, determined not to accept another humiliating existence of constant escape as he ages. The man decides to move towards the boy, knowing that if he runs away now, he will spend the rest of his days immersed in regret. He throws a furious punch, shouting that in his youth, his fists were just as good as that brat's. Lee Sang gives an excited smile and a thumbs up, pleased to see that the gentleman has finally decided to fight seriously. But before the veteran's attack can get close, the young delivery man's fist flies at high speed toward his face. A devastating punch strikes the veteran driver squarely in the cheek, knocking some of his teeth out on impact. The devastating impact throws Kim Taek-soo far away, sending him spinning upside down in the air, while the boy keeps his iron fist extended. With his opponent collapsing defeated on the asphalt, Lee Sang calmly walks away, announcing that he will not charge for the damage to his yellow motorcycle. He mentions that he'll soon be earning billions with his new escort job, so he prefers to ignore this loss. Suddenly, a hysterical and furious scream of curses echoes loudly through the empty street. Lee Sang glances sideways, startled, realizing where the sudden commotion is coming from. Heo Minseop emerges from the shadows, grabbing Seong Seon-ha by the neck and pointing a knife at her, threatening to end everything if anyone dares to take another step. The sharp blade rests dangerously close to the neck of the dark-haired student. Completely out of control, the spoiled heir yells, demanding to know where his cell phone is, and threatens to stab the girl if they don't hand it over immediately. But surprisingly, Seong Seon-ha firmly grasps the delinquent's armed wrist with her own hand. With a swift elbow movement, she lands a powerful blow right in the attacker's stomach. She seizes the opportunity to violently stomp on the bully's foot, causing him to let out a sharp groan of pain. Seong Seon-ha calmly walks away as the attacker collapses to the ground, clutching his injured foot. Lee Sang watches the rapid reaction unfold, his mouth agape, completely shocked by his boss's ability to defend herself. She adjusts the strap of her backpack and says it would be foolish not to know how to defend herself doing this kind of work, stating that she would easily defeat idiots like that in direct combat. The girl makes a point of stomping on Heo Min-seop's bloodied face to leave him completely humiliated on the asphalt. The young delivery man laughs awkwardly and compliments her skills, commenting that she fights so well she could easily solve her problems on her own without needing to hire him. Seong Seon-ha simply turns her back on the boy and starts walking away, paying no attention whatsoever to his compliments. She stops in front of the wreckage of the accident and observes the pile of cell phones that were completely destroyed in the previous collision. Lee Sang watches her with a worried and somewhat guilty look, knowing that her tracking plan has been ruined. The young man tries to justify himself by saying that unforeseen accidents happen all the time in a delivery driver's life, arguing that no one there could have predicted the truck's sudden intrusion. He makes a point of emphasizing that his contracted role is solely to fight and not to protect personal belongings, demanding that his full pay be maintained regardless. But Seong Seon-ha ignores his financial blather and gently holds the young man's gloved hands with both of her own. The delivery man freezes completely and is speechless when he feels the girl's unexpected touch. She looks fondly at his gloves and asks, in a genuinely concerned tone, if the young man's hand is hurt after breaking so many iron weapons. He continues to stare at the young woman in absolute silence, blinking as he tries to process that sudden concern. The boy blushed with embarrassment and stammered, saying he was fine, complaining that she shouldn't worry about him in such an embarrassing way. Seong Seon-ha lets out a long sigh and puts her hand to her head, saying that the boy's idiocy leaves her completely speechless. She begins a hysterical lecture, asking if his hand is made of steel or diamond, and warns that if he were to get seriously hurt, the protection contract would be immediately canceled for breach of orders. The young woman gives her final warning that she will send the boy away without a second thought if he acts like a reckless amateur again, making the delivery man grumble that he already understands the reprimand. Nisab, a faint laugh coming from the asphalt, catches the attention of the two young men who turn to look. Kim Tek-soo appears lying on the ground with a black eye and smiles, commenting on the beauties of youth, advising the girl not to be so hard on her boyfriend. The man confesses that the fight against the boy rekindled his passion and the spirit of a delivery driver, forgotten for decades, promising to try to live a dignified and shameless life from now on. The veteran offers to give advice as a gesture of gratitude and reciprocation, arguing that the strength of the two young people will not be enough to overcome the difficult challenges ahead. Lee Sang curtly rejects the advice, reminding the man that he had just received a monumental beating, even ignoring the old man's plea to help him get up from the cold floor. The boy starts walking and asks how they will get to their next destination since his motorcycle is wrecked, and the girl calmly replies that the next stop is very close by, and that they can walk there. As the two young men walk away down the sidewalk, the fallen old man shouts a dramatic warning, stating that they will both die if they continue acting this way. He explains that he is not mocking them and seriously reveals that both of the young men's names are marked on the dreaded priority delivery list. The revelation causes the two to stop walking immediately, and Lee Sang turns around, asking what on earth this priority delivery thing means. Seong Seon-ha puts her hand to her face in despair, realizing that the threat arrived much faster than she anticipated, leaving them no time to devise a new plan of action. Completely confused and furious at being left out of the secret, Lee Sang shouts, demanding a clear answer about the real meaning of this damn priority combat delivery. He explains that, unlike normal delivery calls which are exclusive, the priority delivery system allows all motorcyclists to accept the same order at the same time, rewarding whoever completes it first. Being on this priority delivery list means that the two have become shared targets for all delivery drivers on the combat platform. Kim Taek-soo earnestly warns that they will be hunted relentlessly 24 hours a day by assassins willing to do anything. Lee Sang lowers his head thoughtfully, considering the gravity of that bizarre situation. But then, suddenly, the boy breaks into a huge smile and asks if this isn't the best thing that could have happened. He excitedly celebrates, realizing that his opponents will come to him without him having to seek them out, and ironically thanks his boss for this wonderful opportunity to make a lot of money. Kim Taek-soo bursts into laughter and calls the boy a complete lunatic, saying that he has become his new idol and again proposing a work partnership between them. But their partnership proposal is summarily rejected with a very curt response. Seon-ha makes it clear that there's absolutely no chance of accepting him as a partner after he thwarted their previous plans, shamelessly telling the veteran to stop following them. The man tries to defend himself by saying that he is just a professional who works for money and that he doesn't bring personal feelings into his work. Suddenly, a heavy leather dog collar is thrown right next to the veteran's face. The object falls to the ground with a dry thud, much to the man's surprised gaze. With a dark and domineering look, the young woman warns that she doesn't want a partner, but says she's willing to accept him if he agrees to be her guard dog. Kim Taek-soo stares at the leash on the asphalt, feeling the terrifying pressure emanating from the girl. To everyone's surprise, the veteran blushes with embarrassment and jokes that if he were a little younger, he wouldn't hide his feelings for her. Lee Sang makes a face of utter disgust at the bizarre interaction between the two and wonders if they're serious about this nonsense. While Min Seop tries to sneak away, Seon-ha reminds him that they still need to go to their last delivery destination, and that they are racing against time. But before the spoiled delinquent can escape, the leather collar is violently and suddenly fastened around his neck. Holding the leash firmly, the girl decides they can simply use the spoiled heir himself to get the information they need. With a sharp, intimidating look, she asks what kind of records and secrets were stored on the destroyed cell phones. She relentlessly warns that she will make the bully spill every detail of the information, no matter what. The sun begins to set on the horizon, bathing the city's tall buildings in an orange late-afternoon light. Lee Sang observes the entrance of the place and asks if that really is the last delivery destination of the day. Seon-ha confirms seriously, recalling the warning that this place would likely be the most dangerous and difficult of all. The delivery man points to the facade and retorts, saying that the problem isn't the difficulty, but rather the fact that the destination is the very school where they study. He complains angrily, asking why they didn't come straight there from the start, lamenting once again the loss of his perfect school attendance award. The young woman justifies leaving her own school for last by saying it was a strategic decision to avoid trouble with other students, although the boy points out that she caused trouble at all the other schools. Kim Taek-soo appears smiling, wearing the collar, and proudly announces that he tied the spoiled heir up tight, exactly as she had ordered. Tied up with dozens of ropes and duct tape in the back of the truck, Heo Min-seop tries to struggle in vain, unable to make a sound. As they enter the silent school, the senior asks what else needs to be done, and the young woman coldly replies that he can simply die in her place if things get dangerous. The man continues joking about the age difference between them, and says she could even call him her older brother, further annoying Lee Sang with the old man's audacity. Suddenly, the young delivery man smells a strong odor of blood and dust in the air, concluding that a violent fight had taken place there even before they arrived. Seon-ha maintains her composure and coldly replies that she was already aware that something terrible had happened. She explains that she realized the danger as soon as she noticed a mysterious delivery motorcycle parked right next to the school's main gate. His gaze is directed toward the window of the student council room. located on the 5th floor of the school building. She mentions that the window is always completely blocked by dark curtains, but that recently it was open and the lights were on. Given this, the girl suspects that some other combat delivery person acted first and thwarted their delivery. Or perhaps she considers the even worse possibility that they themselves were the true targets of that trap. At that moment, a mysterious silhouette begins to walk slowly towards them down the dark hallway of the school. The newcomer mockingly complains about the young people's enormous delay, coldly revealing that everyone in the council room has been dead for quite some time. Bae Min-jun displays his blood-covered fingers with a sadistic smile and confesses that, out of sheer boredom from waiting, he decided to hunt down and eliminate everyone else he encountered at school. He complains that the school seemed too empty and laments not having found more students to massacre besides the council members, leaving Kim Tak-soo in complete shock. Kim Tak-soo steps forward with heavy strides and grumbles that he's just encountered another idiot incapable of following the most basic rules of the workplace. The experienced driver points his finger and delivers a stern lecture, reminding him that killing innocent people unrelated to the order violates an unspoken rule of the corporation, and labeling his opponent an incompetent amateur. But with an extremely quick and precise movement of his gloved hand, Bae Min-jun delivers a glancing blow. An invisible cut silently slices through the air between the two opponents in a fraction of a second. The assassin cleans his blade with complete indifference and angrily orders the old man never to dare point a finger at him again. Kim Tak-soo gasped in pure agony as he looked down and realized his right hand had been cleanly severed by the brutal attack. Completely ignoring the wounded veteran's suffering, Bae Min-jun simply fiddles with his phone and tells him to get lost, as he has no interest in fighting weaklings. He confesses, laughing to himself, that he initially thought it was a waste of time to be hired just to capture a simple high school student, even going so far as to plan to kill everyone at the school on a whim. He continues smiling and confesses that, upon seeing the photo of the target he had received on his cell phone, he was deeply surprised by what he saw. The killer displays an expression of pure euphoria as he recalls the level of excitement he felt at that moment. He shows the screen of the device containing Seong Seon-ha's file, revealing that Lee Sang also appeared in the background of the student's image. The villain focuses his eyes intently on the image of the blonde boy and pronounces Lee Sang's name with great enthusiasm. He flashes a manic grin from behind his glasses and remarks amicably that it had been a long time since they'd seen each other. The boy reveals, to his surprise, that the mysterious opponent is actually an old childhood friend of Lee Sang. While the psychopath leans in sadistically, the young delivery man keeps his gaze down and completely serious. Seong Seon-ha looks back, confused, upon hearing that unexpected revelation about her protector's past. She half closes her red eyes and mentally repeats the word friend with considerable distrust. The girl complains that she had no information about this relationship in her files and demands to know what the hell this story is all about. But Bae Min-jun denies that they are just friends and quickly advances menacingly toward her. With incredible reflexes, Lee Sang intercepts the attack by forcefully grabbing the assailant's wrist. The young delivery driver positions himself as a protective barrier, preventing his former colleague from making advances towards his boss. The villain is surprised by the blockage and asks if his friend really became his personal bodyguard or if that girl is his girlfriend by any chance. Lee Sang coldly replies that she is merely his wealthy client and that he needs to keep her alive to receive his payment. The blonde man suggests taking the young woman away from there and resolving that old feud directly between them, since he is the real target. Bae Min-jun listens to the proposal, and his expression turns profoundly cold behind his glasses. He agrees with a sadistic smile and begins a sequence of rapid, high-speed blows. Lee Sang blocks frontal attacks, demonstrating excellent defensive technique. But the attacker changes direction mid-movement and tries to kick Seong Seon-ha in the back, mocking his promise to protect him. The blonde man is forced to throw himself backward and hug the girl to protect her with his own body from a violent kick. However, in a fraction of a second, the killer's swift hand manages to graze the student's throat. A thin, bloody cut immediately opens on Seong Seon-ha's neck due to the villain's slashing attack. Lee Sang pulls her back urgently and glares furiously at his opponent, who taunts him by asking if he's forgotten who they really are. The psychopath laughs and reminds his friend of the brutal and violent nature of the world they grew up in. He continues his mockery, reminding everyone of the people the blonde man promised to protect in the past. In a cruel tone, the villain asks if Lee Sang has already forgotten the tragic fate that all those people suffered. The fight resumes intensely, and the aggressor acknowledges that his friend's brute strength remains impressive. But he warns that brute force alone will not be enough to contain him this time. Bae Min-jun arrogantly claims to have a clear advantage when it comes to speed and combat technique. He cynically remarks that, although they've never tested who is better in a direct duel, using the injured girl as a burden will make the outcome of the fight obvious. The villain delivers a violent kick that knocks Lee Sang away and mocks the fact that he cut off contact in the past just to pretend to be an ordinary student. He laughs, saying that this quiet little life at school has left the blonde boy's reflexes completely rusted. Lee Sang gritted his teeth in pure rage as he listened to the biting taunts of his former colleague. Seong Seon-ha firmly grasps his bleeding neck and, with his head bowed, orders his protector to return to his side. She looks at the palm of her left hand, completely stained with her own red blood. His red eyes gleam with unbelievable murderous fury. In a fraction of a second, the girl gains momentum and rushes forward at high speed toward the attacker. With a physically immobilizing movement, she throws herself directly against Bae Min-jun's body. The villain's eyes widen in complete shock at the student's desperate physical attack. Lee Sang seizes the opportunity she creates and advances with a clenched fist, overflowing with hatred. The aggressor even tries to mock the immobilization, calling the move a love trap, asking if the blonde man really fell for that silly trick. But his smile vanishes instantly when the young woman whispers close to his ear, questioning whether she is truly considered a burden in that struggle. With a demonic expression and licking the blood from her own fingers, she coldly orders the villain to repeat that insult once more if he dares. Seong Seon-ha uses both hands to firmly grip the sides of her opponent's helmet. She clenches her hands with unbelievable force against Bae Min-jun's head, causing him to let out a groan of terror. She forces his neck joints back, completely eliminating any chance of reaction from the killer. Lee Sang quickly approaches and prepares his most devastating combat move. The boy's iron fist strikes Bae Min-jun's jaw squarely with a monumental force that echoes throughout the school hallway. Lee Sang stares at his defeated opponent and silently reflects on the impressive audacity and courage of his young mistress. Seong Seon-ha catches her breath and states firmly that she will absolutely not accept being treated as a burden by him. Then the young blonde man delivers another brutal punch that knocks the aggressor unconscious to the ground. She takes the opportunity to make it perfectly clear to the fallen villain that the two of them are not dating at all. Lee Sang approaches the kneeling veteran driver and calls him directly over to check on his condition. The young man advises the man to hold his severed wrist firmly, suggesting that doctors will likely be able to stitch it back on if they hurry. Kim Taek-soo reacts with surprise and fear at the possibility of recovering his lost hand. The young man calmly confirms that he knows an excellent clandestine medical clinic for this type of surgical procedure. Suddenly, the girl turns her back on the two of them and starts walking down the dark school hallway, causing the delivery boy to shout, asking where she thinks she's going alone. She replies that she needs to look for any remaining cell phone that hasn't been broken, but the blonde man warns that looking for one is already a waste of time. He drags the defeated villain's body and explains that, despite his impulsive appearance, his former colleague is an extremely meticulous and calculating person. The young man deduces that, since the killer came after their request first, he must have destroyed all the cell phones of the previous victims to erase any trace. He adds that the villain's method of operation is far too bloody, and warns that the massacre scenario inside the council chamber will do serious harm to her mental health. The young woman stops walking and coldly retorts that he has no right to interfere in her personal affairs or concern himself with her psychological state. Lee Sang angrily shakes his fist behind her back, grumbling indignantly about how ungrateful she is even when he tries to be nice and genuinely care. However, she points her finger at the knocked-out assassin and abruptly changes the subject. Seong Seon-ha seriously questions whether that terrible psychopath was truly considered his friend. The guy makes a face of disgust and swears up and down that that bastard was never a true friend of his. He lightly steps on the chest of his unconscious opponent and considers that, if he had to give him a label, he would simply call him an inconvenient stalker. Bae Min-jun suddenly regains consciousness and complains that being called a stalker deeply hurts his feelings, greatly irritating Lee Sang. The blonde man explains to the girl that they only bumped into each other a few times at their old delivery job, and that the villain kept forcing fights and following him everywhere until he was completely blocked. The villain extends his fist, laughing, and insists they are great friends, prompting the protagonist to threaten another monumental beating to make him sleep again if he doesn't shut up. To avoid the worst, the assassin lying on the ground promises that he will be very useful to them from that moment on. He glances at the dark-haired girl in the background and warns that the blonde boy has taken the most dangerous bait possible by agreeing to protect her. The man asks if the young man even realizes the danger he has gotten himself into, describing the young woman's family as the very pinnacle of criminal power in South Korea. With a grim look, the assassin reveals that Seong-ha is none other than the legitimate daughter of the feared Seong-cheol. Lee Sang frowns in confusion and asks who this guy is, causing the villain to mentally curse him for being ignorant and not knowing the legend. Bae Min-jun earnestly warns that she is not the type of person a lowly delivery boy can handle or protect for very long. He advises his childhood friend to go to the Seongchangdong district and look for a leader known as Jungjeon if he truly wants to survive. With an enigmatic smile, he suggests that perhaps there the boy will finally be able to discover who the real murderer of his late father was. The villain gives a thumbs up and boasts about having given invaluable information to his former colleague. But before he can finish the sentence, a heavy school backpack hits his head with extreme force. Seong-ha begins to furiously beat him with her backpack, shouting angrily that filthy worm has no right to pronounce the name of her beloved father. With a look injected with pure hatred, she demands that the killer tell her absolutely everything he knows before she decides to end his life right there. Even though he's bloodied and bruised from the beatings, Bae Min-jun laughs and says he won't reveal anything more, mockingly suggesting that she solve the mystery with her boyfriend. She raises her backpack to deliver another deadly blow, but Lee Sang's firm fist intercepts the strap just in time. The young blonde man firmly grips her belongings and orders her in a firm voice to stop the attack immediately. Trembling with rage, she orders the young man to let her go and asks if he's trying to cover up for that trash just because he considers them both the same type of delivery men. He calmly replies that it's exactly the opposite, explaining that bastard will never reveal any important information because he has been severely trained to endure torture. The blonde man adds that she won't have the courage to actually kill him anyway, and that she'll only end up tiring her own arms unnecessarily. He advises the girl to focus her energies on cleverly devising their next strategic move. Seong-ha angrily drops her backpack and walks briskly past the boy down the hallway. She grumbles to herself that she's completely fed up and tired of dealing with so many problematic idiots in her life. Meanwhile, night falls on the bustling and brightly lit Hyunghwa Avenue, located in the vibrant Seongchangdong district. Inside a luxurious residence in the area, a modern foldable phone begins to vibrate intensely with the arrival of an order notification. A woman's hand wearing carved gold rings touches the device's screen to accept the combat call. The woman sports an extremely elaborate, traditional Korean hairstyle held together by gold hair clips and flower ornaments. Seated with her back to the camera on a luxurious wooden divan, she calmly announces that a new, highly lucrative mission has just been entered into the system. She orders her henchmen to bring the dark-haired student back unharmed, judging that the girl will certainly be extremely useful for her future plans. In contrast, she issues a merciless order to kill the young blonde man and throw his remains directly to the hungry dogs to devour. Taking a calm drag on her long cigarette, the mysterious and elegant leader orders that the assassination job be carried out flawlessly and without leaving a trace. Bound and completely immobilized, with dozens of ropes in the back of the truck, Bae Min-jun can only smile at his situation. He glances to the side and scoffs at the situation upon realizing he's been tied up, along with Heo Min-seop. joking about their terrible taste in doing it. In the driver's seat, Kim Taek-soo confirms that the plan is to take the two prisoners to the indicated address so that the clandestine doctors can sew his severed hand back on. Lee Sang confirms the information and instructs the veteran to give his name as soon as he arrives at the front medical clinic so they can take care of the rest of the treatment. Seong Seon-ha sternly warns the driver not to try anything funny, reminding him that the collar around his neck has a real-time GPS location tracker. Kim Taek-soo gives a thumbs up, assuring them that he won't do anything stupid now that he's received his commission, and asks them both to trust his work. The two young men silently watch the truck drive away down the dark street, with the two prisoners tied to the back. Suddenly, the boy extends his gloved hand and catches a metallic object thrown in his direction. Upon opening his palm, he realizes with surprise that it is a motorcycle key. Seong Seon-ha calmly explains that he must use that key to drive the vehicle since his beloved yellow motorcycle was destroyed in the accident. The delivery man breaks into a beaming smile of pure happiness and shouts with joy, praising the wonderful benefits offered by his new millionaire boss. However, his enthusiasm is dashed when the girl reveals that it's the old motorcycle that belonged to the villain Bae Min-jun. She reveals that she discreetly stole the key from the killer's pocket during the brief moment of physical contact when he grabbed her in the hallway. The memory shows the agility with which the young woman's hand grabbed the key from her opponent's pocket in a completely imperceptible way. The blonde man grimaces in disappointment upon realizing her audacity, while the girl declares that the workday has officially ended successfully. He starts grumbling to himself, complaining about the awful design of his former colleague's vehicle, promising himself he'll buy a brand new motorcycle as soon as he gets his paycheck. Seong Seon-ha simply ignores the complaints and gets on the mysterious motorcycle, settling comfortably to leave. The young man starts walking and asks how they will get to their next destination since his motorcycle is destroyed, but she indifferently tells him to go alone. The girl simply remained seated on the motorcycle in absolute silence, staring at the boy with her striking red eyes. To the young man's surprise, she casually mentions that she's going straight to his house and suggests they travel together on the motorcycle. The delivery driver is completely speechless upon hearing such a direct and unexpected proposal. He starts shouting, flushed and desperate, demanding to know what kind of absurd idea it is to spend the night at his house. The girl lets out a tired sigh, calling him an idiot, reminding him that her own luxurious penthouse had been completely destroyed by hitmen the day before. She adds that, now that both are targeted for priority combat delivery, she needs to be under the surveillance and protection of her dedicated security detail 24 hours a day. The boy tries to argue that it's complete nonsense, but the girl points her finger and interrupts, reminding him of the strict clauses of the signed contract. She solemnly recites that, no matter what happens or what he is doing, his contractual duty is to always remain by his employer's side. Fixing her deadly gaze on the boy, the student menacingly asks if he has already managed to forget the oath he took hours ago. Seeing the boy's desperation and cold sweat, she simply orders him to start the vehicle's engine immediately. With no way out, Lee Sang slams his hand hard on the motorcycle seat in a sign of extreme frustration and defeat. He leans dangerously close to her face and asks seriously if she truly understands the gravity of the thing she is suggesting. The young man becomes quite embarrassed and questions whether she understands the true meaning of a woman spending the night at the home of a man who lives completely alone. With a provocative look, he insists on knowing if she's so sure that nothing inappropriate will end up happening between them on that isolated night. However, Seong Seon-ha maintains a profoundly cold and unwavering expression in the face of the attempted provocation. She gently moves her lips and dares the boy to try anything he wants, leaving him completely shocked by her audacity. She repeats the provocation with complete confidence, telling him sharply to do exactly as he pleases. The girl pragmatically states that if it helps the future combat delivery services succeed, she won't care what he does. Lee Sang is completely speechless at the coldness and disdain shown by his boss. He clenches his fist tightly, feeling defeated by the girl's icy pragmatism. The young man turns his back, sulking, and grumbles loudly that she is far from being his ideal type of woman, especially with that unbearable personality. He noisily throws her the spare helmet and warns her that in his house there is only one set of pillows and blankets, telling her to turn around and sleep on the floor. Shortly after, the two appear cutting through the avenue on the motorcycle, with the blond man sullenly warning that his modest bathroom has no luxuries or modern amenities. The motorcycle finally parks in front of the humble, old residential building where the young delivery driver lives. Inside his simple apartment, Lee Sang lies on the floor to rest and checks his finances on his cell phone. He sighs dejectedly as he sees that the graph of his savings continues to show a tragic loss of almost 100% of his invested value. The boy's stomach ached from worry. He wondered why that crazy girl had accepted his invitation to come to his house so easily. Through the reflection in the screen, the boy observes the dark-haired student sitting huddled in absolute silence in a corner of her small room. Seong Seon-ha remains huddled on her knees with a melancholic expression, appearing deeply thoughtful as she gazes into the cracks in the wall. The delivery man sighs deeply, feeling that this embarrassing and bizarre situation with his boss is going to drive him completely insane. He remembers with a shudder the recent moment when the young woman's lips dared him to try anything. The memory of the confident and provocative tone with which she ordered him to do as he pleased continues to echo disturbingly in his mind. Lee Sang lays his head down bitterly and wonders if what he's feeling is the beginning of a mental breakdown because he let the wrong person into his house. He concludes with complete clarity that nothing good can come from his association with that student, who has such a difficult temperament. The boy promises himself that as soon as he receives all the money from the contract, he will leave without looking back. Seong Seon-ha remained in absolute silence, leaning on her arms, staring back at him with her piercing red eyes. She adjusts her hunched posture on the floor, highlighting the tense and silent atmosphere that dominates the small room. The delivery man rubs his face with his hands and tries to concentrate to finally push away the random thoughts in his head. He glances at his phone and realizes there are only 5 minutes left until the fried chicken he ordered arrives, explaining that his hunger is the reason he's so distracted. Suddenly, the girl leans towards him and calmly comments that she prefers to eat seasoned fried chicken. She crawls over across the mat and reveals that this will be her first time trying fried chicken delivered by an app. Lee Sang is immensely surprised and asks, blushing, if she has truly never eaten simple takeout fried chicken in her life. She explains seriously that she has tasted refined chicken dishes before, mentioning that the housekeeper at her former home was an excellent cook. The young woman recalls that her father was extremely strict and forbade her from ordering any food for delivery, forcing her to eat only luxurious homemade feasts every day. She confesses that, despite all the wealth and isolation, she enjoyed that rigorous routine more than anything else. What she loved most about those daily dinners was the simple fact that her father made a point of coming home to eat with her. However, she sadly recalls one particular night that ended up changing the course of her life forever. On that fateful day, his father sent a text message sincerely apologizing for not being able to return for dinner due to urgent work commitments. To make matters worse, the housekeeper also had a last-minute emergency and was unable to prepare any meals for her. Alone in the immense empty room, the girl ended up seeing an extremely appetizing commercial on television for tteokbokki delivered by an app. Salivating at the images in the advertisement, she decided that this would be her first and only experience ordering food for delivery exactly 2 years ago. She waited anxiously in the hallway until the doorbell rang, announcing that the delivery person had arrived with the ordered food. On the other side of the imposing entrance door, a voice loudly announced the arrival of the delivery. The young woman responded with great enthusiasm from inside her house while holding her cell phone. She asked the delivery man to wait just a moment and began to unlock the heavy security lock on the entrance. Upon opening the door, she was confronted by the imposing figure of a mysterious motorcycle courier wearing a dark helmet. Seong Seon-ha focused her red eyes on the distinctive appearance of that combat delivery man. The man held the plastic bag, prominently displaying the official Delivery Heaven logo on his jacket. The image highlights the round logo of the delivery company stitched onto the chest of the motorcyclist's uniform. Seong Seon-ha faces Lee Sang and asks if he truly believes that all of this was merely a coincidence of fate. She swallowed hard, her red eyes wide with tension as she recalled that dark moment from her past. She explains that the very first day she ever ordered food through an app was an extremely memorable and tragic experience, for it was on that very same night that his father, Seong Gyeong Cheol, was brutally murdered inside his own private office. And to his surprise, the look and clothes of that mysterious combat motorcycle delivery boy who delivered dinner caught his attention. She fixes her gaze on the blonde boy and reveals with complete seriousness that the biker's appearance was identical to Lee Sang's. She categorically states that she has no doubt whatsoever that the murder was coldly planned and executed through the app. Lee Sang raises his head in absolute silence and lets out a heavy sigh at such a revelation. He murmurs bitterly that the situation regarding his protection job has turned out to be infinitely more complex and problematic than expected. Suddenly, the young man gestures for silence and warns that there are at least 2 people peeking outside the door and that they certainly aren't the fried chicken delivery men. He complains that this was precisely why he didn't want to let her into his house, grumbling about whether he'll have to pay the additional nightly fees for beating up those new intruders. But Seon-ha warns him coldly, reminding him that he himself is still considered one of the main suspects in the crime. She remains seated in the corner of the small room while the young man prepares to check outside the apartment. The student sharply warns that if her father's killer is indeed him or someone very close to him, their partnership will be over for good. She makes it perfectly clear that she will show no mercy and will hunt down the true culprit to the end, sparing no one from her vengeance. At that same instant, a deafening sound of breaking glass occurs as an intruder in a dark helmet smashes the window and bursts into the blonde man's room. The young blonde man stares in surprise at the shards of glass scattered across the floor of his small room. He quickly opens the door and finds himself confronted by 2 burly men blocking the exit from the hallway. However, on the roof of the humble residential building, a mysterious man wearing a stylish gray overcoat holds one of the helmeted invaders suspended in the air by the neck. The defeated motorcyclist gasps in terror and desperately begs for his life as he tries to free himself from the iron grip. The newcomer, with dark hair and an icy gaze, merely murmurs indifferently as he watches the criminal's agony. Without any mercy, he violently throws his unconscious opponent's body directly onto the concrete floor of the rooftop. He calmly turns towards the illuminated corridor and asks in a firm, decisive tone if the blond man before him is the famous Lee Sang. The mysterious man in elegant attire extends his hand in a friendly manner toward the young blonde delivery man. With a steady and serene gaze behind his dark bangs, he officially introduces himself as Yang Ji-woo. Lee Sang simply stares at the outstretched hand with complete indifference and an expression of extreme boredom. The young man sharply tells him to remove his hand, explaining that he doesn't usually greet other men with handshakes. Yang Ji-woo awkwardly pulls his arm back and murmurs, understanding the young man's hostile refusal. He gives a slight smile and agrees that the young man's attitude makes perfect sense given the circumstances. The prosecutor admits, ironically, that he himself ended up being the impolite one by forcing that sudden greeting. But in an extremely swift movement, the man pulls out a retractable steel baton and strikes Lee Sang. He rants that the greatest disrespect there is the very existence of that third-rate delivery guy. The blow breaks part of the concrete structure of the roof of his rented apartment, while the prosecutor complains about the boy's lack of manners. Yang Ji-woo grips his metal weapon firmly and warns that he will teach the young man his lesson the hard way. With a menacing look, he vows to reduce the delivery man to a level lower than that of a stray dog. Completely outraged by the damage, Lee Sang yells and curses at the prosecutor, complaining about him having destroyed the wall of his rented apartment. But Yang Ji-woo ignores the dramatic protests and advances again, like a swift shadow toward the blonde boy. The young delivery man is forced to use his own arm with agility to block the violent attack of the baton. He takes a step back and looks at his member with an expression of slight surprise. The prosecutor pauses the attack for a moment and asks, intrigued, what kind of defensive technique that was. Lee Sang examines his opponent's staff and mocks its effectiveness, questioning if he really thinks he can defeat him with such a toy. However, The boy feels a sharp pain and realizes that his block has indeed been damaged. The prosecutor points to the bloody wound that opened on the delivery man's hand and says he'll cure his insolent arrogance first. He cynically claims that the blond man's absurd arrogance stems from his complete ignorance of who he is really facing. Lee Sang examines the bloody cut and mutters irritably as his opponent assures him that he doesn't need to feel so ashamed of his partial defeat. The man in the overcoat speaks disdainfully about how the current social system is flawed for allowing insignificant people like the delivery man to roam freely. The blond man wipes the blood and retorts, asking what kind of cheap philosophy that guy is muttering out of nowhere, questioning if he's also some kind of combat motorcycle courier for the platform. Ignoring the boy's teasing, Yang Ji-woo solemnly pronounces Seong Seon-ha's name. Raising his metal weapon, the prosecutor declares in an authoritative tone that he came there with the sole and exclusive mission of taking the girl away with him. Lee Sang laughs mockingly and comments aloud about how incredibly sought after his young boss is by so many problematic people. He makes it very clear that she represents his only source of millionaire income at the moment and that he has no intention whatsoever of handing her over to a stranger. The prosecutor counters, asserting with complete certainty that the girl herself will choose to go with him of her own free will, believing that anywhere would be better than being near trash like the delivery man. The two opponents once again face each other intently on the building's rooftop under the starry night sky, ready to resume their life-or-death combat. Yang Ji-woo fixes his deadly gaze on the blonde and prepares to deliver the killing blow. But suddenly, a firm, icy order to stop echoes through the empty cover, immediately halting the combatant's action. Seong Seon-ha appears imposingly, stepping out of the terrace door with her arms crossed and a deeply bored expression. She glares at the prosecutor angrily and demands to know what this charade is all about, reminding him that she had already ordered him to stop following her without permission. However, the girl ends up referring to the newcomer with the affectionate term, older brother, leaving Lee Sang completely shocked and speechless. Yang Ji-woo immediately lowers her guard and dramatically complains that she cannot accept the situation she has gotten herself into. He screams hysterically, pointing his finger at the blonde delivery man, deeply lamenting that his beloved protege is associating with a street delinquent while he loses sleep from worry. The young woman ignores the scandal and calmly explains to Lee Sang that, despite appearances and the dramatic outburst, that man in the overcoat is not a bad person. She officially introduces the man as Yang Ji-woo, a prestigious prosecutor from the Northern District Prosecutor's Office who has been looking after her security since she was a little girl. The prosecutor yells again, saying he doesn't want to be introduced to that insignificant worm, and promises to give the blond man a monumental beating until he runs away, scared with his tail between his legs. With absolutely no patience for the scandal, Seong Seon-ha puts his index finger to his lips and tells his older brother to shut up once and for all. Fixing her striking red gaze on him, she intimidatingly questions whether all that shouting means the prosecutor is doubting her ability to judge. Completely cornered and sweating profusely under the girl's pressure, he stammers desperately, justifying that he would never doubt her, and that he is only very concerned about her safety. Satisfied with the man's quick submission, the young woman turns her back and prepares to return inside Lee Sang's apartment. She abruptly orders everyone to go inside immediately so they can calmly plan their next move against their common enemies. Yang Ji-woo accepts the order with a dejected crestfallen, feeling deeply humiliated by the harshness of his beloved protege. Lee Sang simply observes all that bizarre family dynamic in silence with his typical bored look. Moments later, the crispy, hot-fried chicken is finally delivered and placed on the table. Sitting comfortably on the floor and enjoying his meal, Lee Sang holds a bottle of soda and politely offers a drink to those present. Yang Ji-woo appears, sitting with his arms crossed against the opposite wall, and loudly rejects the offer with utter disdain for the simple location. Lee Sang fixes his furious gaze on the chicken and mentally warns that he will finish off anyone who dares to lay a hand on his beloved food. While savoring a crispy piece, the girl comments that, despite the day's bloody mishaps, they finally achieved their goal of discovering their next destination. She explains that the clue leads them directly to the Seongchang-dong district, considered the worst and most dangerous entertainment area in all of South Korea. Their ultimate goal in that chaotic region is to find the mysterious and influential criminal leader known by the codename Jung-jeon. The girl gives a mocking smile and comments on how that pompous nickname is so exaggerated that it's almost embarrassing to pronounce it aloud. Given this, she decides to give a rather peculiar codename to christen that new and risky secret investigation. With an enigmatic look, Seong-seon-ha officially christens the mission with the codename Operation Fried Chicken Delivery. Lee Sang ruins the air of mystery and asks if she's really going to blindly trust the clue given by Bae Min-jun, reminding her that that psychopath isn't trustworthy. He advises his boss not to take the words of her former childhood friend seriously, stating that this professional liar usually talks nonsense all the time. Yang Ji-woo gives a mocking laugh to himself and classifies the delivery man's cautious attitude as a typical reaction from lower-class people. The young blonde man grinds his teeth in pure rage and demands an explanation from the prosecutor about that gratuitous insult. Chewing on the chicken cynically, the prosecutor claims that detecting lies is his professional specialty and assures that Seong Chang-dong's information has already been duly verified by the justice system. The delivery man finally loses his temper and lunges at the prosecutor, yelling furiously at him for devouring his precious dinner even after having scorned his simple apartment. To make matters worse for the blonde man, Yang Ji-woo complains that the food ordered is from a cheap, bland brand that ended up ruining his appetite. Completely beside himself, the blonde boy shouts, demanding that the prosecutor and the girl pack their things and get out of his house immediately. Completely ignoring the homeowner's tantrum, the prosecutor throws the chicken bone into a disposable cup and pronounces the number 78 people. He reveals seriously that this is the exact number of murderous bikers who have been hunting the two young men since the beginning of the priority delivery. To Lee Sang's astonishment, the prosecutor explains that they didn't realize the threat because the police had taken care to preemptively arrest all the attackers before they could approach the building. He casts a stern look at the blonde man and questions whether the boy truly understands the extreme gravity and the real danger of death they are in. He explains with chilling data that almost all the people marked on that blacklist end up being brutally murdered in less than 2 days. He adds that the rare survivors usually flee the country in desperation under heavy armed escort, calling it completely absurd that the young man was calmly enjoying his chicken.